Audio contains explicit language. Listener discretion is advised. Previously, on Hope in the Ashes.
Writing was right. I didn't know if, I always could just picture, even now, it's like you hear all these voices of people saying, you're a piece of shit, you're this, you're that, you talk weird, you talk funny. Most people are sending me back even further. Right now, I am deeply aware of the emptiness that consumes me. Day by day, I battle to be where I've always wanted to be at 26 years old. I imagine living independently with someone by my side. I want this book to stand the test of time as a memoir which showcases how a 26-year-old recluse-hurting soul analyzes the life he lived before, one which he sees so many of the obvious outcome of that decision would render. It became a decision between making a deal with the devil, sealing a fate for myself that would plunge me into a pit of darkness I never once entered, or cower to the almighty ruler and run away from all self-righteousness.
This is Hope in the Ashes with Sean Fay. Chapter 2: Total Meltdown.
When I was growing up, I never held an idea of there being a time my parents would no longer be together. I just thought whatever happened was the norm and they would figure things out somewhere down the road. There were ups and downs just like any other marriage, but I never realized what was going on was never meant to be the standard. I remember my former therapist Jim sharing with me what he noticed from his other clients dealing with divorce. It is so much more peaceful on the other side since the bickering and arguing is over, and everyone can go back to living a simple life without any stressors around in the household. While I find that to be the absolute truth, I sometimes become disgruntled at the idea our family is now like so many others, broken and unrepairable. Since that day in 2022, he's only seen red. That's the only color he sees. He always claimed his favorite color was green. I know that's fucking bullshit. Through the ebb and flow of our relationship, I always believed there was some level of genuinity from him. He did nice things for me, and I eventually did nice things for him when I was of age to buy shit on my own. Living in New England, the Boston area is the hotbed. He took me to a Red Sox game when I was very young. I remember we sat in the right field roof seats. We sat at a table, ate great stadium food, and I was scared of Wally the Green Monster. I've had my fair share of phobias. Some I grew out of, some I may never. Clowns, mascots, car washes, water, dogs, rain, to name some. Anyway, that game was when an army friend of his and his wife were in town visiting us. He and his wife are great. I haven't seen them since they visited around 20 years ago or so. Last I knew, he worked as a contractor in Illinois making a pretty good bank. However, that was what I last heard from my father, and now I never have a clue if anything he ever told us was a truth or lie. Sadly, he is slightly involved in an event later, which was the beginning of the deterioration of my father and I's relationship. Eventually came my first Celtics and Patriots games, the Pats as New Englanders call them. I was an avid sports fan for a while. Really, when politics became a mainstay in each sport, that's when I was turned off from them. But when I was in elementary school, SportsCenter was always on the first thing when I woke up in the morning. That's how I hold so much knowledge of 2000 sports in my brain still. However, one sport always stuck out to me and still does today. Auto racing has always been an interest of mine. I don't think there was any initial reason for it. There's so many things I grew interested in which I cannot think of one reason why. I don't know, maybe I'll think of one eventually. I've been big into NASCAR. I was hot on Formula 1 briefly, but I eventually fell back to NASCAR as I was getting involved with the game NASCAR Racing 2003 season, or NR 2003. That game and its community, or lack thereof, generated its own set of dilemmas for me. I was eventually led to my own demise and pushed out of a league by two guys I really respected, solely because they didn't like me anymore. Yeah, that shit got toxic really quick. The game was great for the first half of its lifetime before I hopped in, and there's still some great people in there today. But from what I saw over the 6 years I was in it, it began to collapse into the pit of evil it is today. Egos, deception, and sheer dominance of one another. There's absolutely no teamwork with them. It's just mayhem. For my 9th birthday, my parents decided to buy me tickets to my first ever race. On June 4th, 2007, I attended the Autism Speaks 400 presented by Visa at the Dover International Speedway in Delaware. While they could have picked a race at New Hampshire Motor Speedway, much closer to us than Dover, it's obvious to me autism had something to do with it. Whether my dad in a sick fashion wanted to stick autism up my ass, or my parents just merely picked it because I had autism and the mere relation wasn't meant to be any dig at me, I still have no clue to this day. Regardless, I was excited to see a NASCAR race for the first time. Really, it was the only time I've ever seen a NASCAR race in my 26 years on this planet. I did get to see a race held by the Superstar Racing Experience at nearby Stafford Motor Speedway, just a half hour away from me in 2023. That was really cool. I went to the race in Dover with my dad and another one of his friends, one from high school. He became my godfather when I was born, and now he's sadly dead to me. My dad, flying at nearly 100 miles per hour, because he could, got us down to Delaware in nearly half the time it was supposed to. 6 hours ended up becoming 3.5. We stayed at a Best Western in Newark, just under an hour north of the track. Sadly, race day ended up being postponed due to rain. That posed an issue as my dad had gotten the days off for the trip and needed to work the next day. That meant we had to head home for him to get to work. I was crushed. Actually, I was completely destroyed. The first race I ever went to just had to get canceled. I was sobbing, just beside myself. That's when my dad said fuck it and ended up calling out sick the next day and got our hotel room back for one more day so we could see the race. To a degree, I was shocked that my ploy to stay one more day ended up working. Knowing my dad, no usually meant no. We had to stick to his plan at all costs. This time, he finally saw the hurt I was in. Maybe his cold soul warmed up just enough to see my pain and correct it? Really, after realizing what I was going through with him, I only see the branch for which my elation extends from. He probably didn't call out sick solely because he wanted me to be happy. Really, that's only where it starts. It wasn't just to make me happy. It was to, on top of that, create a good deed he knew would further feed his craving for feel-good porn he could spew to his buddies at work. Most often, it was never just to be a good father and please his son. If there was a further benefit, that's really what would motivate him to do things. If that benefit wasn't there, the good deed was off the table with no exceptions whatsoever. Regardless, I was so elated to get to see what NASCAR was all about in person. I am not at all ungrateful for seeing that race. It's just what I see looking back that leaves that nasty taste in my mouth, even if it may not have been true. Oddly enough, I don't recall much of it at all. The only events that stuck out to me were sitting in the stands that Sunday hoping for the rain to stop. Then I remember on Rain Out Monday having the sun shining directly in my eyes, so in all the pictures of me that day, I was squinting so I could see past the bright light in front of me. I do remember Martin Truex Jr. from Mayana, New Jersey, scoring his first ever career win on that day. I have pictures of his burnouts and him in victory lane. Sadly, his marriage ended with his wife of long, Sherry Pollock, just a couple months after my father left. Eventually, 9 months after Truex and Pollock separated, she died in September 2023 after losing her battle with ovarian cancer. One thing I definitely don't remember is a big loss that day. Bill France Jr., the CEO of NASCAR at the time and son of NASCAR's founder Bill France Sr., died that very day I was at Dover. Literally have no recollection of that, but it happened. I knew I had so much fun being a part of something I always dreamed of doing. I still dream of hopping in a car and racing myself. Hopefully someday. I could go through so many other things my dad and I had done together, but the point I'm trying to drive home is he did do things for me. Even if they were often centered around his own itinerary, there were times I got to do cool things. However, when it came to going somewhere or doing something with him, that was a different story. I was never inclined to do anything with him as I tended to find him very annoying at times. While it could be attributed to simple childish reasonings, I now realize those reasonings really stemmed from his personality. First off, when he would ask me to go somewhere with him, he would always force the outcome he desired. It would always go like this. Hey, you want to run to Home Depot with me and get some shit I need for the gym? Not really, I would respond after the gaping pause. I don't give a shit. Pack your stuff, you're coming with me. Like, why the fuck would you ask me to go with you if you're going to make me do it anyways? Well, it was a test. Was I going to give him what he knew was the correct answer? Every wrong answer led to him forcing his desired outcome on me, as if he was sick of hearing no. I would always pause for a substantial time because I knew I really didn't want to go with him. A, because I was admittedly enfolded in whatever I was doing, video games, personal stuff, etc. And B, I wasn't in the mood to hear him bitch and complain about every single thing that wouldn't go his way. He was nearly always in a shit mood about something and was never genuinely happy at all. What I later realized was chronic. Now I come to the end of 2021. At this point, for some nonsensical reason I can't recall currently, my dad decided I was a piece of shit lowlife, a failure, and would be a cellar dweller for the rest of my life. He randomly came up with this mantra about me nearly out of thin air. Maybe it was because I quit my job delivering Amazon packages? Their inhumane bullshit procedures caused me to sprain my left ankle while hustling down a sloped driveway. That alone was a pretty scary experience for me, as I obviously never really broke any bones or anything like that before. When I got back up after falling to the ground, it was a very weird feeling not being able to walk under your own power. I just knew I was fucking done after that day. Amazon pushes their delivery drivers to try to complete their delivery routes in such unrealistic time frames, and then shame you for not doing so. I and everyone else know that due to the 100% turnover rate that job has. Every person hired ends up leaving. UPS, FedEx, and even the Postal Service don't nearly see that much turnover, unless I'm horribly wrong. Honestly, the treatment and behavior you receive from Amazon is eerily similar to what my father seems to love and enjoy. The one thing I can't say is the company I worked with wasn't like that at all. They did their best. Things became so frigid that fall. For someone as conflict avoidant as I am, this was my worst nightmare. I never wanted to have the relationship with my dad or mom ever get to as low of a place as it did the rest of that year. My dad and I were not speaking to each other. Period. He wasn't because he was so entrenched within his newly established paradox where I was a failure. He couldn't handle that weight, let alone the 300 he carried. He would claim it was all muscle. The rest of us knew it wasn't. That was eerily similar to the gray hairs he grew, which he called blonde highlights. I wasn't talking to him purely as avoidance of the problem. There's fight, flight, and freeze. I hate admitting it, but freeze has always been my stronghold. Having the balls to stand up to immediate conflict has always been something I've wanted to manage effectively, but never could face up to it. I tend to fall into the category of all talk, no action. I'll always act macho in private, then cower once the pressure arises. Sometimes I believe it's because of my good guy complex I've always lived by. Other times I believe it's because I'm afraid of stammering and looking like a fucking idiot, which would therefore make me feel like a fucking idiot for even saying anything, thus creating this dreaded cycle I've inhabited for so long. Thanksgiving was where everything hit the floor. We were sitting at our small table in the kitchen at our house in Hamden. I finally had to face my father after all our forbearance from connection. Even better, I was sitting next to him. My mom and brother were sitting across from us. It was relatively quiet for a bit. Then out of nowhere, my father proceeded to utter something I now see as nothing other than an adult temper tantrum, as well as a cry out for a repugnant response. "Talked to Uncle Casey earlier today." We paused. "He said everything was going well. Kids are all right. He asked how Daniel was doing. Told him he was doing good. He asked me how Sean was doing." He paused again. Remember, I'm in freeze mode, so I'm paralyzed by everything he's saying. Wanted to tell him he was doing good, but since he's a college dropout and a failure, I didn't know what else to say to him. Uncle Casey is his army friend I mentioned earlier, for the record. Really, we were all paralyzed at what he had just said. I didn't want to believe he really told him that, but I don't know for fact. It was one of the most bizarre, grotesque moments I had ever experienced. Hindsight tells me it was calculated. I don't know what shitty-ass calculator he was using, but obviously it didn't get him through the school of hard knocks. I was so bewildered between him referring to me in the third person when I was sitting right next to him, which could have been him talking directly to my mom, and the pauses he inserted. This was where I was beginning to sense a rapid shift in our relationship. This was unlike anything he had done before. It was like I was entering a realm I would never come back from. Little did I know he was doing this shit to my mom for nearly the entire time they've known each other. The rest of that Thanksgiving slowed to a crawl. I'm now reminded it was the final Thanksgiving we had together as a family. This was the linchpin for the depreciation in value our relationship had. I still recall going to my 5-year high school reunion the day after that frightful night. Everything around me went dark for what felt like a while, but really it was about a month or so. Since my father had put me in the basement, it was fairly easy for me to hide out for that duration of time. Like I mentioned earlier, we wouldn't even say hi to each other. Even when he could open the door and shout down to me, he wouldn't even do that. I would act normal when he wasn't home, but the second he arrived, I would run downstairs and shut the door behind me. That's how determined I was to avoid him. That darkness was met with a blast at the door the night of January 14th, 2022. It was the night before the start of my dad's Golden Gloves boxing tournament he ran every January and February. I was his sound manager, as he titled me. Not music director, or even audio production manager. Fucking sound manager. Anyway, I was out delivering DoorDash, Uber Eats, and Grubhub orders as I grew to love doing at the time. It got me decent money to get by, but I loved listening to music while doing it. I was delivering a DoorDash order for a large pizza from Big Y, the grocery chain I mentioned earlier I worked at. I had to deliver it to a house on a street off Wilbraham Road in Hamden, which wasn't that far from home at the time. I pulled up to the person's house, got out of my car, got the pizza, left it on the person's front foyer, took the picture I needed for DoorDash, and started walking back to my car. At this moment, my phone vibrated. I looked at it and immediately felt my innards contort. You're turning into a real fucking winner. Thanks for touching base to see if I needed anything for the Golden Gloves that starts tomorrow. I thought you would have come to the gym to get your shit together for tomorrow rather than sleep till 1 o'clock. Do I need to find another DJ for the Golden Gloves? Oh, fuck. Here we go. That was my reaction to seeing his bombastic approach to parenting. That's when I decided I had enough. I was tired of being hurled down into a feces-filled abyss every fucking time he doesn't like what I'm doing. All the torment I went through needed to end tonight. Everyone has their fucking moment. This was it for me. So, I fired back. Well, you're turning into a real winner too. I've been waiting all week for you to give me updates, let me know what's going on with everything. You know, when are we setting up? When do I have to be there? Things like that. But clearly you couldn't be bothered to let me know. If you would have just waited until tonight, I was going to ask you since you couldn't be bothered to let me know. You know I'm around too. I don't always have to come to you to know things. I know things haven't been the best lately, but I'm really getting sick and tired of you blatantly ignoring my presence lately. Just because I don't come upstairs all the time doesn't mean you can't give me a shout downstairs and acknowledge me every so often. Whatever happened to that? I just got that job with Amazon. You should be happy with that. But it seems that doesn't satisfy you either. Now's the time I need your support. No matter what happens, we always love each other. Your negativity and your petty bullshit doesn't get us anywhere. I can't move forward if you're pushing me back. I would like your support so I can get back on my feet. I'm done with what's been going on. Now it's time for you to move forward too. So with that being said, what time do I have to show up for? And where? Then my father continued. No, it doesn't. It actually disgusts me. You are such a smart kid with your entire path locked in. You failed out of school and can't hold a job. I have failed as a father. While beginning to feel the intensity of the exchange, I chimed back. You had me do music for the kids and everything worked fine. That's for you to think, and maybe I failed as a son too, but there's still time to fix things. I'm willing to move forward, and I'm hoping you will do the same. At this rate, I was doing anything I could to stop the bleeding. Did I really think I failed as a son? No, but if it meant it would get him to stop and come to a truce, that was my goal. He came back. 5 years ago, you had the world by the balls. He wasn't wrong. I responded. I did, and now I'm going to get that back. Then he shouted back to me like a 5-year-old asking his parent for a toy he really wanted. Please, please, please. It rendered another feeling of peculiarity similar to the Thanksgiving shit show a couple months before. Here I made my declaration. You have my promise. That unfortunate transfer of power was a huge victory for me. I was continuing to stand up to him. Sure, I could have held back, said nothing, and stuck to my initial plan of talking to him when I got home. But desperate times call for desperate measures. I've learned that to be the case in so many moments of good and bad. I couldn't take it anymore. It had to stop. Once the Golden Gloves tournament commenced, nothing really seemed to change in any drastic form. With most families, any misbehavior would be dealt with. Then after, there would be a more graceful period on the other side. From hell back to heaven. With my father, it was never like that. Hell to heaven would really be hell to nothing, I guess. There was never redemption with him. After I fucked up, it was whatever. Not that statement, but the action. He would just not give a fuck, plain and simple. So I'm sure you could imagine the perplexity I had to live with of never knowing whether I was doing something right or wrong. If he wasn't screaming like an idiot at me, I guess I was doing something right. Well, sure, I'll get that one. When I began to look for jobs again, I eventually found an opportunity to do as I did with my post-secondary education. I was set to begin work this time at an Amazon redistribution center in Connecticut. However, my dad offered me a job from a guy he knew at a printing press close to home. While I had every intention of starting the new Amazon gig, I sat one day and entered thought. I could do this Amazon job I'm kind of not really excited for. Or I could take this job he offered to me. Maybe it'll even make him happier for doing that. Maybe this will allow us to rekindle a relationship and get back on the right track. Maybe even he'll help me get out on my own. It was at that moment I committed in similar fashion to college to doing one more thing that might make him happy. Needless to say, while the job itself was good for me at the time, I absolutely abhorred having to sweep the floor when you have nothing to do for a whole 8-hour day. You want to talk about hell? There you have it. However, it wasn't common I had nothing to do. Usually I was stripping paper for projects that came off the printing presses. One thing I loved doing was feeding projects through a gluer, a long metal contraption which would literally, as the name of it says, glue parts of a project together into a finished result. Some would hate having to stand and feed a gluer for part or all of the day. I just loved it because it was the easiest thing to do. I did meet one kid younger than me who really helped me navigate that place each day. Thank God for him. I hope he's building himself a bakery as he kept telling me he always wanted to do. I'll buy a wedding cake from him. I worked at that printing press for nearly 8 months until I took another job delivering groceries for another grocery chain, Stop and Shop. That job didn't last long at all, due to the stress induced by what eventually happened. I guess over 4,000 words or so, I'll get on with the pièce de résistance of this book. We were living at my mom's childhood home by now. Again, she never wanted the house to begin with. But my dad insisted on buying it because it would make her happy. 2 months prior, I went to give him some money I owed him. When I walked upstairs and reached the kitchen table, I overheard an argument going on between them in their bedroom. Naturally, I entered freeze mode, placed the money on the table, briskly hobbled my way into the bathroom, shut the door, locked it, and sat down on the toilet. I didn't have to piss, shit, or anything like that. I was just in that paralyzed state I always would be in throughout those crucial moments. All I could decipher from it was my father threatening he was going to leave. From that day on, there began to be a mortal stench in the air. The doomsday clock of my parents' relationship and marriage struck 1 minute away from midnight. It thereby established a despondent morale for me. Between that argument and the following November, days grew darker and darker, harder and harder. My job became difficult to manage since I was constantly on alert for when the nuclear missile was about to strike ground. People began to be harder to deal with as my blood began to drown me. It boiled to the top of my head. Changes within my body began to be so seismic I didn't know whether I was stuck in a nightmare or trying to grasp onto reality. That was the feeling I would have for a long time after that day. 11/22/22. It was the 326th day of the 47th Tuesday of the 48th week of that year. I had no clue what was coming. I went to work, no problem. I was stressed about my shitty-ass car not having any heat in it. Could you believe I froze my ass off 2 full winters without heat? Fuck. Anyway, I had reached the end of another day. While I was waiting my turn to punch out, I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. Every time my phone would vibrate, I always feared it would be something going down at home. When I pulled out my phone, I saw the beginning of a chain of text messages between myself, my father, and my brother. Instantly, my heart rate spiked. Eyes dilated. Blood pressure rose. This was it. This was the end. The missile had made contact and imploded. Chaos was ensuing. I punched out, rapidly walked to my car, sat down, shut the door, turned the car on, and opened my phone to see what my future held. My father sent us this message. Guys, I will always love you, will never turn my back on either of you, but I am leaving the house. Your mother is going to make me out to be the bad guy, and that's fine. There has been so many things that has happened through the years, and I took it for too long. I don't want you to know so much and see your mother in a different way. Just know I will always love you both very much and will always be there for you. I will always ensure you have what you need. I promise. My brother responds, love you too. My dad adds this. I'll always love you and be here for you. Always. My brother finally came to his senses and asked him about his convictions. Why are you making Mom look like the bad guy? I have heard pretty much all of what you guys argued about. I really think that is sort of, no offense, but I think it's a mutual thing. My dad, responding to him, begins to utter one of the statements he would repeat a lot throughout the divorce process. There are so many things that you just don't know about. I don't want you to look at your mother in any different way. She loves you very much, and so do I. This separation has nothing to do with you and your brother. It's been a long time coming, and you and your brother are old enough to understand that not everything is perfect. We have both made mistakes, but some I just can't look past. Just know that this has nothing to do with either of you, and I am not walking away from you or your brother. I will always make sure you both are taken care of and have everything you need. My brother, still confused, responded. Why are you walking away from Mom, though? I know you won't turn your back on us, but us includes Mom. My father came back with this. Trust is the most important thing in a relationship. Without trust, it won't work, and she has lied to me too many times that I just can't trust her anymore. I don't want to tell you all the lies because I don't want you to look at your mother any differently. If she wants to make me look like the bad guy to make herself feel better, that's fine. I will never leave her to fend for herself. I always make sure she and you guys had a roof over your head, but it's about time for her to see what it's like to have to go to work every day and earn a paycheck that can only be stretched so far. My brother replies, She has never made you out to be the bad guy, at all. After realizing there was no turning back from what occurred, I entered a certain zone where my focus became so potent my inhibitions ceased to exist. I was locked in. I knew what my father needed to do to repair his relationship with our family. I also knew he refused to complete any of the necessary tasks I was about to point out to him. I had enough. I was done. So after everything around me faded into the backdrop, I lasered in and engaged. How can you honestly say you will never turn your back on us when everything we ever do is a problem to you? She's been doing everything you've asked her to do. She's got a job now. She's in school now. She's been keeping the house clean. I've been pitching in more as well. All of that, and you're still not satisfied. I tell you I finally got myself a new job that's better for me, and all you could do is bury your hands in your face. Not a good job, not an I'm happy or proud of you. Everything is negativity with you. We give you an inch, you want a mile. It's never enough with you. And here you are, instead of trying to mend things together and fix the cracks, you want to say it's broken and walk away. That's not a protector. That's a coward. Maybe there are some things I don't know about the two of you, but it sure as hell seems like you would rather leave it broken than fix it. If you're going through something, what is so wrong with talking with us about it? Better yet, talk about it with someone who will listen to you, contrary to what you may think. You wonder why we don't talk to you, because everything we ever tell you is negative. And on top of that, everything is always your way and no one else's. If it's a midlife crisis, we can help deal with it, so long as you communicate with us and be cordial. I think finding someone else to talk to you would be helpful as well. If you don't want to do anything to better yourself and our family, then you can't honestly tell Daniel, Mom, and myself you're always there for us. Because right now, you're not. It was true. I told him about my new job, and all he could do was hide himself from whatever bullshit shame he had. Fucking pathetic. After I dropped that counter, my brother praised me. I agreed with everything you just said, bub. Every last word. Next, my father utters two more monotonous claims he negligently clutched onto throughout the divorce process. Alright, she has obviously coached you. Everything you have is because of me. There are so many things that have happened that you know nothing about. What happened? Still, no one knows to this day. Not even my mom. My brother goes back to town with him. She has never said anything bad about you. Never. I only feel these things due to what I see and hear around you and Mom. I am not being coached. I would never allow myself to be told what to think. I have my own feelings, and I don't tolerate people telling me how to feel. Now for my turn. Things you don't want to tell us? You know you could tell us anything you want, but instead it's always stuff you don't know. Nobody is saying you're the bad guy, but your actions are dictating how things are going now. All of this can be worked out by simple conversation. Instead, you want to walk away. You saying, obviously she's coached you, already shows you clearly don't want to be any part of our family. You'd rather point fingers elsewhere and deflect any blame off of you. People screw up. It's normal. What isn't normal is blaming others instead of taking ownership of the things you did wrong yourself. I'm sure that both of you have done each other wrong at times. She's always owned up to her faults, you have yet to. I've screwed up with things myself, own up to it. It's normal to do that, and I don't understand how it can be so hard for you to do the same. My brother then added to what I said. Exactly, I could say that too. I have trouble owning up to what I did, but I still try to be better in the future. I come back in. You raised Daniel and I all these years to be respectful, responsible, courteous, know right from wrong, and it seems like you don't even take your own advice. It makes no sense how someone who's made it his life to raise champion adults can't even be one yourself. My father had to be spinning himself in deplorable hysterical circles because all he could come up with was this. You have no idea! That's all he could say. Not shit, you're right. Or I will do what is best for all of us to get the help I need. Not even I'm sorry. Just intolerable childlike screaming through a text message on a cell phone. What the fuck? I then became done feeding into his destructive cycle. I knew at this point he clearly wasn't going to come back around and realize what he needed to change. So I had no choice but to deal him the blow. All of this can change for the better when you make the decision yourself to better our lives, but most importantly, yours. That's all that needs to happen here. No, I don't think you do. I've had an idea for the past 15 years. Just because things haven't gone how you want it, this is what you have to do. You have to just run away from the problem instead of pushing issues aside for the betterment of your family. Figuring out what needs to be done to ensure your family is protected and secure. I'm not going to keep going around in circles. It's not hard. Once you commit to repairing whatever you're dealing with in your head, or whatever you think is wrong, things aren't going to get any better for any of us. I still can't describe how I felt after pathetically dealing with my demented, boorish father. I guess it was similar to the freeze feeling I mentioned earlier, but there was another layer added right on top like a cherry on a sundae. My father wasn't going to be home. He will never be home. Never again. The man who spent 24 years of his life trying to build me into a man who could conquer the world and show everyone people with a diagnosis like I have can survive in this world will no longer be there at the end of the night. Getting married, buying my first house, seeing the birth of my first child and the second, all will never include him. Not only will he not be included, but he will also be barred from the premises. He will never see my wife, kids, and my house. He will never have a reason to. My wife and kids will never have a reason to see him. Their grandfather will not be. He will only be imaginary. But you know what? It'll be alright. Because my wife and kids won't be antagonized by him nor by me, ever. When I arrived home, noticing his truck wasn't there, I gingerly walked to our door, not knowing what I would walk into. When I opened the door, I noticed my mom was distraught. She exclaimed to me that my father was bitching at her because she got a letter in the mail from a local courthouse notifying her of a default judgment against her for a credit line she had from the shopping site Finger Hut. After going back and forth with him, she told him she could go to the gym and bring the paper with her so they could figure out what to do. He then told her, if you show up at the gym, I will have you trespassed and arrested on the spot. I had never thought in my entire lifetime he would make such a threat to her. Shockingly, he was never physical with my mom during their marriage, so this was already unsettling enough. From there, my mom snapped and told him to get his shit and get the fuck out. After he resisted, she told him, I'll pack his shit and have it ready at the door for you. It took 28 years of courage for her to finally proclaim that to him. That led to the texting exchange my brother and I got into with him. After I went downstairs, I broke down, sobbed, cried, paced back and forth, and fought through every minute this new reality protruded me for. I wrestled around this newly found grief for the rest of the night. Later, my dad got his shit, and he was gone forever. I haven't seen him since that day, and I never want to see him again. Grief it's interesting. Well, I mean this phantom grief I now hold. It feels like a death because in a way it is. That day, I finally had to accept he was never going to get the help he needed to be a strong, healthy figure for our family. Instead, he was making a heinous decision to run along his erroneous narratives where we were coached this was a long time coming and that everything we have is because of him. On top of that, I'm now a piece of shit college dropout who needs to be taught a lesson in humanity. Next, I'll get into how he made that exact claim. Yet humanity is now making a lesson out of him instead. His projections, gaslighting, manipulations, and domination, all which would only feed his self-indulgence, could be no more. For the sake of my mom, brother, and myself, for the sake of our mental and physical health, we couldn't afford to deal with this fucked up bullshit anymore. So we said no more.